Okay.
Okay. So I'm Elaine Pasini, and thank you for joining me. I have got the really lovely person that I like to call my friend now that I've kind of chatted you, and it's really such a pleasure to have Lee Castleton on our YouTube and podcast today. Lee, I probably like many other just lay people watching TV, reading newspapers, had never really heard, if I'm honest, may have heard it on a page and thought, oh God, that's awful. Turned it over, unless you know someone who's going through it, about the post office being what it's like to be a sub-postmaster, having a computer literally saying no all the time.
Yeah.
And until I actually saw the ITV's amazing story being told of Mr. Bates versus the post office. And I, just like so many of us, I just cried because I thought it could be any of us. It could be any of us. And the feeling that you have absolutely no control or power and you know nothing has happened. So that was the first time I'd ever heard your name. Because why would you want anyone else to know your name? You're just a lovely guy working hard.
Yeah, just want to get on with our lives, don't we?
Yeah. So before we, and I hope you don't, because I know that it's traumatic because you're living it all the time. So I'm going to be, led by you, Lee. But I wonder I just want to ask what life was like before you became what was life in the Castleton household like before you became a sub-postmaster?
Well, I spent 9 years in the Royal Air Force, where Lisa and I got married, and I did my service, my 9 years. I didn't do anything extra. I just did what I'd signed on to do, and left and became a stockbroker. I was offered a training course in Canary Wharf on West Ferry Circus for an American investment company. They offered me, through a friend of a friend, if I wanted to be paid whilst I trained. And to be honest, I wasn't very good at it. And it was a lot of time in London and a lot of time away. By then, we had 2 small children, and we were looking for something that we could set up or do as a family. And Lisa's mum and dad have a retail business, and Lisa's very good in a store environment. And we just felt that if we could find something just really solid and homely, really, we weren't looking to make billions or anything like that. We were just looking to make a living and enjoy our lives. And so we found the post office on Marine Drive in Bridlington and paid £300,000 for it. At that time, I think I was 35 when we sold. We had a lovely little bungalow in the middle of basically nowhere. But it was paid for. We had no mortgage. We'd worked and worked and worked, saved and saved and saved. We're very good savers, and we were very lucky in the fact that we could send our children. We're at a small prep school, and we were just really enjoying life. Yeah. And then, gosh, did it change?
And that's, for a 35-year-old man, you served for the British Army, the RAF. You had done your stint there, so thank you.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, you've tried something that could have made you loads and loads of money, but actually you're just a really family man, and obviously you're based in North Yorkshire.
North Yorkshire, and I'm a very Yorkshireman, if you know what I mean. So very happy here. I'm very happy in my environment here. I've got a very large family. I'm one of 7 children, so there's lots of we've lost my mum and dad now, but lots of grandchildren, lots of children's children, and it's very easy to become immersed in the family.
Yeah, and why would you not want to when you've got that kind of that support network around you? Do you think, you know what, that Canary Wharf, it could be, it's great maybe for someone, especially if you're living down here and you like that stockbroker and Canary Wharf and all that corporate stuff. But like you said, you tried that, but it wasn't for you. So actually, you've saved so much, worked so hard to be able to, at 35, to have no mortgage. That's hats off. Because actually you think, you know what, what's next? It's going to be okay.
I have a mortgage now.
And it wasn't okay.
No, it wasn't okay.
I'm laughing because it's so awful.
That's okay. So I've gone full circle.
It's come full circle, and I, you know, what I really want from, you know, meeting
I often
you
feel as though I got into a canoe that was going down this massive white rapid river, and I didn't realize at the time just how much that journey was going to cost me.
No,
And not just monetarily, I mean in the whole of life, if you know what I mean.
literally cycle the whole of your body, that the everything that you encompass has been impacted so traumatically.
Absolutely.
Your friend, your wife, your kids, your external family. So I wondered, like, just because it's so hard for everyone to get their head around, to think, at what stage when you thought, oh, this is lovely, I mean, how wonderful, it sounds so quintessentially kind of, you know, that rural, I've got my lovely place, got wonderful people who I trust, they trust me, I trust them, this community. When did you realize, when did the Horizon kind of software, was that there when you started, or did
yeah, it's already there. It'd been in the office for about 3 years, and it had caused issues prior to that, but I was assured by the outgoing sub-postmaster that, you know, it was a case of just do as you're told, basically, and everything will be okay. Just do what they say and just bite the bullet, basically. And I didn't really understand the conversation at the time. I just thought, you know, it's the post office, right? You know, so yeah, all I'm going to do is just do what, you know, what's expected of me. And I was very happy to do that. And at first, when we first took over, it was idyllic. You know, on an afternoon, I would, particularly when the kids were off school, we'd go down to the beach, which was literally, I mean, you could hit it with a stone. It was directly opposite, and beautiful flat Bridlington Beach. It's a beautiful place to be, and the kids were only at the time 8 and 6. They just loved it. We would swap over between my wife and I on roles, and so I could take them out, or that she would take them out, and it was just idyllic. And then we got to Christmas that year, and it just completely, well, it just fell apart, really.
So what year was that? Take me back to that.
2003 is when we bought the business. So 18th of July 2003, we bought the business.
At Christmas.
Yeah, and we worked through to that Christmas in 2003, and we misbalanced for £1,103.18, which I didn't know at the time was the start of a 12-week furore of misbalancing. But at the time, it was just a 1-week issue, which I made good, which is what the contract says. I made all the calls that I meant to make, and they kept saying, don't worry about it, it'll come back, you've made a mistake.
You made good with your own money?
Yeah, so £1,103.18 was made good with my own money. And then the following weeks were just traumatic. You know, the scenes in the drama where I'm constantly ringing people trying to get to the bottom of what was going on, because sometimes we had too much money, not very often, but sometimes we had too much money for the balance. More times we had huge amounts of too little money, and on one occasion in the 12. So bearing in mind, all the time that I'd been there, we'd never misbalanced. I mean, to a penny, not a problem. And then only once in 12 weeks did we balance, and either side of that we were up and down and all over the place. I just couldn't get my head around it. I just didn't understand it. And post office in the phone calls would just keep saying, oh, don't worry about it, you're doing something wrong, it'll come out in the wash, you know, you'll have made a stupid mistake, you just need to make good. And I kept thinking to myself, well, I can't just keep pouring money in, nothing's going to change. And so after the third week, we had a visit from my line manager, and it was quite heated, the conversation. She didn't really care. And I'd been told we'd retained a member of staff, by the way, who'd been there 16 years. So she knew the place inside out. Yeah. And she'd always said to me, you know, she kept saying to me over the weeks that we were misbalancing, the easiest way to draw a line under anything and just to get to the bottom of whatever's going on is to ask for an audit, because that's when somebody comes in from outside. Right. And then you can deal with whatever the ramifications are from that. But you can't.
Oh, sorry. When you say outside, is that completely independent audit?
No, it's an audit by Central Chesterfield. So it's outside the loop that's in the office, i.e. myself, my staff, but also the management that we see, you know, that come around, the retail managers and things. So it takes it into more of a corporate environment. So it becomes non-personal in effect.
Yeah, but still internal to the whole organisation.
Yeah.
Personal with this kind of like, let's chat this through because I know, Lee, what, you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'd already become quite sort of adversarial. Yeah. I wasn't very happy. I must admit, I was very, very upset about the whole thing, because I just felt as though everybody was just turning their back on me. The more calls I made, the less answers I got. It was just awful, really. It was really, really awful. And when they came in, the auditors, basically, I didn't know what they did. They just came in and they counted top to bottom what was in, which was exactly what we'd been declaring. You know, there's nothing different. So there was a £22,000, £23,000 shortfall, which then turned into, when they do all the back office things, they said it was 25,000. And I just wanted the police involved, you know, because they were suspending me. They said that they were going to suspend me, and I wanted to make sure that as many people saw what was going on, because I hadn't died. I was quite happy in the fact that whomever needed to be involved needed to be involved. They kept saying to me, well, this money's missing. And I kept saying, well, if there's money missing, we need the police, because I haven't taken any money. But they would not get the police. They would not. They kept saying that it was there was no need for that. There was no need to get the police involved. And that they would deal with it and work it all out. And I kept saying, well, if there's no money missing, it's got to be a system issue, which is what I've been telling you for 12 weeks, because I don't understand what's going on. And then they just all went away and put a temporary in.
So
I didn't
when you suspended,
come in. I just agreed that they could.
Because you're exhausted and you're like, just...
Yeah, well, I wasn't allowed to work behind the counter, so it would have been closing the counter or allowing another person to come in. And I didn't think that people of Bridlin deserved not to have a post office there.
No.
So,
Because you care.
yeah.
And what was it like at the time? Did your kind of community know what was going on? Did you feel like it's
At
hard?
first they didn't. It was a bit of a... They tend to do it this way as well, which I didn't realise at the time. But they went back to the old sub-postmaster. Well, as soon as they told the old sub-postmaster who lived in the town that there was £25,000 supposedly missing, and that I was in the frame for that, it went round town like that. And then I would get abused. You know, the kids and the wife and me would get verbally abused all the time for being a thief.
Yeah, sorry, I'm waving.
All right.
So that's my husband trying to come in. So I thought I'd actually locked the door. Sorry, wearing his army kit. But sorry, everyone. And so quite quickly, you know, that's kind of, you know, when I've studied a bit of psychology years ago, it's that people can turn on each other very quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah. We became, you know, not to everyone, because a lot of people, you know, knew that whatever had gone on, whatever was happening, there were realists in the fact that I'm sure it'll all come out in the wash type thing. But there's a small group of people that just hear something and that's true.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that becomes true, particularly if that makes them have to do something else. So in one particular case with my daughter, she was spat at on the school bus because the boys' mum and dad had to go elsewhere to get the benefits, and putting them out, which I get, you know, I'm sure that we were, you know, for whatever reason, but to take it out on my daughter was terrible.
Yeah, I have to say, Lee, and I can feel the visceral kind of pain when I watched back. I mean, there are so many kind of parts, aren't there, of the inquiry, but when I watched and listened to your daughters, it was just so heartbreaking as a parent myself to think what she went through and didn't want to tell you and your wife to protect you. I'm sorry, I've upset, but you know what, it's heartbreaking to think that something that was out of your control, and they were being literally ostracized, spat at and everything, and she was hiding in the toilets at school.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to tell you because she cared and loved you and didn't want to hurt. And I think, you know, as a family, it speaks kind of volumes that you all care so much. And actually, I know that she's gone to be a teacher, and we were just speaking for her live of the amazing that she's doing with the humanities and teaching younger children now about the ethical and moral compass of them. But to bring back about that, obviously that it's triggering, and I'm sorry to do that, but we have to
Right,
hear it. And I
nice.
think we need to know that, because
No, I get
it hits us, and you think,
yeah.
it could be me, it could be my husband, it could be any of us, and that's what's so shocking. So may I ask, because I think, because you didn't work in law, you're a lovely dad from Bridlington, and you've been the RF, and you've got this gorgeous kind of, this little store. Talk to me about what it was like for you to think, right, I have to go now fight, and I have to go down to London myself. Where was the stage? Where did that cross over to become a litigant person?
Well, at first I had legal cover through the business, 50,000. Right. And we spent probably 18 months going around in circles of letters back and forth. The post office then put me into Scarborough County Court to try and recoup the £25,000. We turned up on the day and post office didn't. So they awarded a judgment against them for my counterclaim. And that, I didn't realise at the time, that just became absolutely huge for the post office to overturn this thing that we turned up to. And that was led by my legal person at the time, who was based in Manchester, and he was very good. And I would explain to him, the only way that this could have happened, the only way that we've got all these differences, is because there's something wrong with the system. But we need to get that information. And he tried desperately trying to get disclosure of everything, and they just never answered any questions, really. And we would write letter after letter after letter, all at the expense of the insurance company, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say, through the insurers. So they're fighting, the lawyers through the insurers are fighting for you.
Yeah, and it just swallowed. They had a bottomless pit of money and just swallowed up money after money. One of the things I did pay for was 1 week of the figures to be broken down.
Okay, for your own kind of thing. You know what? I'm going to invest in this.
Yeah. So that cost £10,000, and that came up with differences. But the person that did the workings out, the company, decided that he didn't think that was enough to go to court with, because there were differences there. And my argument was, if there's differences in computer output of figures, it would be impossible. You couldn't have a difference, even if it was just 1p. If there's a difference, there's a difference. But it was, he said it was so small in comparison to the losses that he would find it very difficult to argue in a court of law.
Right.
And then
evidence was there, but not enough to kind of.
And then it turns out in the post office's non-disclosure of the work that one of the Fujitsu people did, they actually put in one of the paragraphs, it's kind of okay because Lee Castleton hasn't spotted the differences. So we don't need to address that. So hey ho, it's life, isn't it?
Mind-blowing that this is kind of in writing. That's what I said. He hasn't noticed the differences. So from that kind of small, where they didn't turn up in the Scarborough.
So over the next months, we went through the rest of the money, really. And it got to a point where the my solicitors then were needing more money, which I could draw on some money, but I'd not been paid for a couple of years. And we were in a situation where, we were juggling everything, as it were. And I didn't have anywhere else to go.
I was going to say, Lee, as well, at this stage, you weren't allowed to be. Was Lisa still allowed to go into the store, but not behind the counter?
So we were still running the shop then, but not in the counter. So the counter salary, everything about the counter was going to a third party who was paying me literally nothing at first. And then we came to a deal with a lovely, lovely lady who's actually a lifelong friend now, who took over, and she would give me whatever was left after she'd paid a reasonable salary to herself and paid all the the bills, and she would pay the rest as rent, which, to be fair, kept us open, really. Because we wouldn't have survived. But on that basis, I mean, it closed very soon after anyway. But up until that point, we were just drowning in it, really. Trying to fund the legal case, and I was trying to fund keeping the shop open, and it is what it is.
Keeping the community going, keeping your family going, and at this stage, and I know it was trauma, because you look back at something, you think, I can't believe I survived that. But while you were in it, we were just kind of on adrenaline the whole time, thinking this can't be as bad
Yeah,
as it is.
I just expect, it's really odd. Even now, I keep expecting, or I kept expecting at the time, that somebody would go, "Oh, it's okay. Don't worry, we found it. Don't worry, it's okay. We're very sorry, we found it." And obviously, that never happened because I just, there was so many things that didn't add up. So many things that didn't make sense, but they were quite happy. The other side's legal people were quite happy for not having any sense to anything, but just to keep carrying on down that same path.
Yeah, like no analytics per se, just like, oh, we'll just, it's literally that.
Anything that didn't help them was ignored. And then it was a case of putting it to proof, which I just didn't do a very good job in court, really. Yeah, I wish I'd been,
And that's one of my questions to you, why would one know, if you don't work in this, to think, gosh, you knew what was going on, you had all that evidence, I've seen all the paperwork that you had, things like, God, drowning in it, but you knew every single minutiae. So of course, as a litigant person, you think, well, I can't afford any more legal representation, I'm going to do it myself. How bad can it be? Because it's the law, right? They're going to protect me.
Well, I kept saying to myself, all I need to do is explain this, and then everyone will go, "Oh, yeah, of course it is." And I, like, as you say, I'd spent hours and hours and days and weeks and months and years on this paperwork, so I knew it inside out. But every time I wanted to produce something in the court and explain it, it seemed as though it wasn't important enough for the judge to listen to, because I had actually got the wrong argument. I didn't understand it from the beginning. The reversal of burden of proof to me didn't mean I wasn't really educated in the legal side enough to understand what I needed to do to prove the system, and it became impossible for me to do that without having all of the technical. As soon as you put a expert, whether you deem that person to be an expert or not, into the witness box, whatever they say, the court will take precedent. Whatever they say. If they say, from now on we're going to call sky blue pink and pink sky, then that's what the judge will, defer to.
Did you ever find that the judge was really kind of actually helping you at all? Did he guide you to say, Lee, maybe step away and kind of work?
I think in certain things he would allow me to be to act improperly, not improperly, but not within what they would expect from a professional. Yes. And I think he protected me in the way that I was allowed to ask questions that probably other people wouldn't have been allowed to ask. But I completely missed the ball. That's what really annoys me more than anything. When I look back, if I'd realized it was never about the computer, really. It was about the accounts. As soon as Richard Morgan, bless him, had flicked it onto an argument about accounts and signed accounts, it became very difficult for me, and I didn't realize the difficulty at the time. Looking back at it now, I realize my naivety and my stupidity. But at the time, I really believed that putting paperwork in front of a judge that was black and white and said, that this happened and that happened and those two can't happen on the same line, I believe that it would change his view.
So as a litigant person, do you think the support could have been that the other side disclosed to you, actually, we're going to be focusing on the accounts within the system rather than the system itself? Well, they did. Then you would have been armed with...
Yeah, I mean, they did put their case, they put their case against my case, and I don't know, I just didn't get it, really. I didn't realize the strength of a finding, even if it was in 1870 or whatever. I didn't realize the strength of something that had been through appeal after appeal after appeal, with 5 judges making a decision on the strength of an account. And I don't understand why it's okay to have an accounts argument that was brought about on written accounts, and then we were dealing with electronic accounts. But in 1997, when the law changed and the law of evidence changed with respect to computers, it was every single aspect of the case against me just became very difficult for me, and I didn't realize the intricacies of that.
And it's quite interesting then, it sounds to you like it's really knowing the precedents, isn't it? If someone's already got that, it's like, well, this is what happened. It's set a precedent, therefore that's what's happening. And it's very hard to fight that precedent.
It's very difficult to be able to take that precedent out of a box, unpick it, and then pick the pieces that actually are relevant rather than the whole thing. And it's very difficult to get the court to listen to an argument based on tiny aspects of something. That's just,
For them, time is money as well, right? It's court fees, it's everything. So it's like,
no, true. And the thing is, because it's being fought in such a way previously, and no two cases probably are ever fought in exactly the same way, every precedent wouldn't be worth anything if it was continuously being able to be unpicked. I understand that the courts have to protect against that, but I still don't understand. And I'll probably take it to my grave, the fact that a written account, a ledger, made a decision against a computer-generated account.
Yeah.
But the truth is that they had access to my accounts. So whilst they were saying it was my account, it wasn't until 2016 that they admitted that they did have third-party access, and in fact could repack a line of code exactly as if it was written by me.
Really? So that took what, 12, 13 years?
Yeah, the case still stands, which is something that people don't realise.
No,
so
don't.
Still a matter of the court. It's not been overturned. It's not been set aside.
Well, I'll have to look into that. Maybe afterwards, when we jump off this, I can.
Yeah, but it is still standing. Don't get me wrong. That's because I don't want it to be set aside. I feel very aggrieved about how that case was taken against me, and I feel very aggrieved about at the way that it was allowed to unpack. And I also feel very aggrieved at the fact that if I was to just allow it to be set aside, whilst the record would show that that was gone, I think if it had been a conviction, a criminal conviction, I would have had a right to an appeal in court, and the judge would have made a definitive judgment on the real evidence.
Right.
Whereas in the civil court, I'm not going to get that, and I don't like that. I don't think it's fair.
It doesn't seem fair, does it? Because it's just like, boom, it's kind of like black and white. There we go, off you go.
Yeah, it's just
pay the money back.
Yeah.
So when you had done that, and they were like, right, that's it. No, not in your favour, thanks. What then happened?
So I was desperate then to do a deal for the costs. So they awarded costs at £321,000, and I tried to open avenues of correspondence with Post Office to try and work out how I was going to pay this money back, and they were not interested. They just never replied to anything, no matter how many times I wrote. I even got my accountants to write numerous times, giving deadlines. If you don't come, if we don't sit down and work out a payment plan, somewhere that he can allow Lee to carry on with his life, but also be in a position where he can pay this money that you say he owes, then we need to move forward on some kind of correspondence. And they just never did. Never.
You were in this horrible limbo for a long while, thinking, what were your thoughts at that time? Like, I'm going to go to prison, or I'm
well, my biggest concern,
bankrupt, they're going to take my house.
Well, I was, at the end of the day, I knew that £321,000 was going to make me insolvent completely, but I was desperate to work. And that was a thing that I needed to sort of try and protect against. And actually, it's referred to in the inquiry by Mandy Talbot, saying there was a letter saying that he thinks he's just going to go back to the city and everything's going to be okay. So they knew exactly the path. They wanted, when you look from outside, and certainly the things that were said to me prior to going to court, they weren't just looking to recoup £25,000. You don't spend £321,000 in order just to recoup something you're not going to get. They wanted to make a very, very strong case, so that nobody else ever questioned the Horizon system. And they wanted to make me, they wanted to hang me out to dry. And they certainly did. They ruined me, absolutely. I was never allowed to. Again, naively, I would apply for jobs in the hope that I could get back into a really well-paid city role. Not a chance. People would always give me, their time. They were very gracious with their time, but they would never give me a role. So
you were blacklisted. Is
Yeah.
that why you felt you were blacklisted?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and then because post office would never engage in anything to make some kind of agreement, I ended up having to apply for bankruptcy myself, just to try and protect, not to protect money, but to protect the unknowing, and to put a third party into the loop that would make sure everything was done fairly, more than anything else. It was just about fair. Yeah, and that's why I did it.
And Lee, did you know at that point, so can forgive me, remind me at what stage you knew you weren't alone?
I was definitely alone then. I've never felt more alone in my life as being judged. It's a very lonely place. It wasn't until I had this huge, as you know, pile of paperwork, 6,000 documents or something. And in there was some particular spreadsheets with regards to software that was being updated at Fujitsu, which was only released in a second court date because one of the witnesses had referred to this software updates, and nobody knew. It was called a Tivoli file, and nobody knew what it was. I got sent a copy of it, and then I was allowed to go back to court and cross-examine on this particular piece of evidence. And I wrote a number of letters back in the day, no emails, to various different people trying to get some information about this Tivoli file. And one of the people that I wrote to was Tony Collins at the Computer Weekly magazine. It's a bit of a jokey sort of thing, really, because I can't imagine he ever expected a letter from someone like himself, but he'd been advertising in the magazine that they had technical help specialists that they were giving time away free. So people on PhD students and degree students were offering to help you with your technical, whatever you had, they would just come in and give you a hand and help you through any problems you're having. But they never expected a big Tivoli file from me and say, can you help me with this? And that's how that opened an avenue of conversation with the Computer Weekly magazine. And then he'd seen something from Alan Bates previously, and he'd been involved in the Chinook tragedy, so he dug into all of the things that happened there, and he saw something in the two letters that we'd written and thought, there must be something involved, something in this. And he asked one of the young reporters there, Rebecca Thompson, to give us a call and see where it went. And she wrote a story about, I believe, 8 of us, which she interviewed over quite a period of time. It didn't come out until 2009, and they had to legally check everything over and over. But that was the point when we no longer were alone. We had 8, and then we had 12, and then we had 20, and it just grew and grew and grew. So, right at that point, right at that very, very point with Tony Collins, I was very much close.
I mean, it's a kind of sliding doors, isn't it? It would have come out somehow, but how interesting that, like you said, you saw there it was, PhD, Will there to help, and there is this massive file that I don't. And again, it's about the accounts rather than to do with the system, but he's on. But that fight,
when you talk to all of our group, and I had a long chat with two of the members of our group last night. They were driving back from London, so hands-free. They were just having a little chat, and it's one of those things where you just gather so much energy in a group. When you're in a group of people with likewise, anything that's similar problems, whatever those problems are, I don't think it matters what those similarities are. It galvanizes you. And I remember the first meeting at Fenny Compton when there was only a small group of us, and Alan had pulled chairs around in a circle. And I remember just thinking, this isn't going to be the end, this is the start.
Yeah. And that must have, even though you've gone through so much as a family, the community, and like you said, the bankruptcy, just thinking, I was solvent. I had this sorted at 35. And then you're like, what? And like you said, it's not about the money, but actually we need money to survive. And that's that.
you know, it's what we just became very trapped in our lives. We had a property we couldn't afford. We had a business that was closed that we paid a lot of money for. We had two children that, you know, dependent children. It's so difficult. We would worry about everything, you know, everything. We had no heating for a couple of years. We had all kinds of different things go over those first short 2 years that were very painful.
And it really stands the test of, you know, of the testament of you as a family to be able to stay together. Because I could, you know, we've seen a lot of people can split up,
Yeah,
take lives, whatever it is, that what that went through and what, by no fault of your own, has devastated so many lives, just normal kind of people. So I can't imagine how it must have felt for you and Lisa to think, it's not us, I'm not going mad.
yeah.
More of us can fight together.
I think it became, I mean, we've been married 33 years now, so it's, you know, very lucky. And I think the other people in the group were so solid as well. You know, Noel Thomas and Joe Hamilton and Alan Bates were so solid citizens and so solid of people that life became easier as a group.
Yeah.
You know, we had so many shared problems, if you like, but so many shared similarities and so many shared sort of processes that we've been through, but so many things that we wanted to join together to push forward with as well. Life became, whilst it was still very, very difficult, it became very directional. We suddenly had direction. We knew what we needed to achieve. We knew, and as more and more people came on board, I don't just mean victims.
Yeah.
We went through a process of people getting involved, like Nick Wallace and Rebecca Thompson had left, so we then had Carl Flinders, who came on board, who's written something like 500 stories on the subject. You know what I mean? It's
incredible. I've read more and more about it because I'm linked with you. I can read it. It's fascinating.
You know, you couldn't, that kind of input into other people's lives. That's the other thing. They're not claimants, not victims. They're looking from outside in. They're not one of the group, but by their actions, they become so immersed in things. Mm-hmm. You know, Nick Wallace must walk around feeling as if he's one of the group, because he certainly
it's like osmosis.
Yeah, the hard yards have been travelled along with him. You know, he's been there in the very dark times when we couldn't get any traction with anything and we couldn't get anyone to listen to what we were saying. And he's also now in this euphoria of information going out where people are, you know, reaching out and saying, well, what do you think, Nick? And it must be a wonderful thing, but he's bloody earned it. You know, he's really earned it. And he's done all of those hard yards with a group that we're so grateful for. And there's so many. It's not just those two. There's Lord Arbuthnot, who's been phenomenal in the way that he has fought our corner is just wonderful. And Kevin Jones, and there's lots and lots. You know, and we're so grateful to all of them.
And it sounds like, you know, these people have pure empathy as opposed to sympathy. It's like they're walking in your shoes. They need to know what it's like to be able to, so they've got maybe the journalistic or the reporting heads thinking, oh, hang on a minute. So it's that kind of, like you were saying initially, it's like, no, someone will realize it's wrong because it's there. And you get some kind of, you know, people who work with you like, okay, this is what I'm good at. I'm going to dig, and I'm going to use my contacts or my network to kind of say, hang on a minute.
And can you imagine how many times, say, Nick has pushed a story out to somebody that's been knocked back, but then he's gone again and again and again and again. And it's only now that that's become fruitful. From the sort of the beginning of the inquiry, people have really, really taken to listening, but more so from the drama. You know, when you opened, you talked about this computer accountancy problem. I remember talking to one of the BBC reporters, a lovely lady called Caroline Bilton, who came to visit me in Bridlington back in about 2013. We were talking about mediation. She'd come to the property and we were chatting away, and she said, so for the camera, what's it all about? So I said, well, accountancy and computers. And she glazed over and she went, oh no, you can't say that. Nobody will listen. So we learned very quickly that it became about human beings and people and people's treatment of other people. Because that's really, you know, people talk about computers going wrong every single day, but it doesn't cause what's happened to the victims.
No.
What causes what's happened to the victims is the people. The
And
people that could have made this differently, but chose to punish people for no reason other than they could.
so let's talk about this kind of fact, if we can be, because it's really something that the whole, I think, you know, the legal profession has really got to, you know, they've got to not grips with it, but they are really leaning in and thinking, whoa. And the more the regulators kind of, you know, put down, because but the regulators are looking after the consumers of law kind of thing. But it's, I think, you know, I don't know if people go into law to be, you know,
Well,
natural nature, but pardon?
Aren't we all consumers of law? Even if I'm not
All of
paying
us.
the bill, even if I've employed a lawyer, barrister, whomever, or not, even if I've not, because law becomes precedent, law becomes fact, then we're all using the law in various different ways, aren't we? So it's got to be done in the right way.
It really has.
Mm.
And from, like you said, going out on ITV, so it was really, whoa, can't miss it, because the acting was brilliant as well. So
it was never meant to be that, by the way.
Was it not?
Well, it kind of evolved. You know, Natasha, who's the most wonderful lady from the production company and from Little Gem, and she's so talented and so industrious and hardworking and wonderful. And the first conversations that we were having was this docudrama, this documentary. We're going to do a documentary about it because there's so many facts in there, and it grew and grew into a drama rather than a documentary. So it was never planned as being that way. It was going to be more factual, but as it grew and as Gwyneth, the writer, sort of pulled these wonderful threads together. I mean, what kind of talent have you got to be able to take so many story threads and interweave them into a timeline in the way that she has, but still maintain that individual humanness, you know, within the characters? And it's quite spectacular in its simplicity, but it's certainly not simple, isn't it? You know,
it's not simple at all. But like you said, every single person I know, and I know a lot of people around here who have watched it, and pretty much everyone has watched it. That's just said, it hits you in the gut, in the heart, because it's like, it's about the people, and I think it could be any of us. That's what a lot of people think. It's just good, normal people going about their day battling. It's literally the Goliath.
No, absolutely.
That's what it is.
Yeah. And I spent 2 years talking to Gwen. Gwen's actually got a little cottage here in Scarborough where I now live. And we'd just meet for coffee, just sit down, and I'd weep. I do a lot of crying. And
I see you, then I'm crying, and we're all crying, and it's better out than in, Lee.
Yes, absolutely. I've learned my lessons, don't you worry. I'm quite happy to openly cry in a cafe, don't you worry. I can manage.
You're northern, let it out. From Yorkshire, but how lovely is that she's, so can I ask you, I wasn't going to ask you, but actually, who was it then that heard from the ITV or that kind of thing, from that story, to think, actually, this is a really good documentary that people need to understand or hear about, you know? So it's going to be from a journalistic point of view to then. So
Little Gem themselves came to the Court of Appeal when the 39 went through in 2021, and basically were just asking if any of us, they wanted a nucleus of people to be involved to do a docudrama, and some people chose not to be involved from that, and some people wanted to be involved, and so we all had a long chat. And then it just evolved from there. So it was never planned that way. And ITV were never involved early. You know, Little Gem took it on themselves to develop it, and then they took it along. And that's a huge gamble in itself. They put, you know, Patrick Spence and his team, Ben Gale and Natasha Bonby, you know, they all had a vision, I suppose, of what they wanted to achieve. And then that just kind of evolved. But Natasha particularly, I mean, it was Natasha's project right at the beginning, and she followed it right through to the very end. And she, I think there's a huge part of her character in there, you know, a huge part of her character. And I think that's the case with Gwyneth as well, because Gwyneth, she really wanted to make it so that it was very human. I think it was not just emotional, because it is very emotional. I mean, particularly for the group, because you see, there's a lot of things in there that I see, and I think, yeah, I wouldn't want to go back there again. I don't want to revisit that.
I think that's just it. It's because we all have emotion, we have feelings, we have behaviors, but
Yeah.
and that is all encompassing, like you said, that human. Because I think what it is, it sees that the funny side, the kind of, you know, I'm laughing at myself because I can't believe this is happening, or and the conversations together, and just I think, you know, I guess that's where they thought the documentary could become a really beautiful drama to people to think this is what's happened.
Yeah.
But of course, people buy people. We want it. We get invested in those characters.
No, that's true, absolutely true. And I think the hardest thing that we had throughout the whole period prior to the drama was to get people to understand. You know, not because we wanted to talk about the technical things, and people probably wanted to talk about the people things, and it's very difficult talking about the people things. You know, sometimes I've done a few talks now where I talk about all the things. Can talk openly, happily about certain things, you know, maybe ethics or morality or what happened, events, you know, how things unroll, and then somebody will say, "How's your daughter?" or whatever, and it just boom, triggers. Yeah, to places that you just don't ever want to visit.
No.
And that's not because it's buried, because it's not. I haven't put it in a box and put it somewhere else. It's just, it's very, very difficult. You know, it's very difficult to understand the feelings, really.
Are you angry?
No.
You were you angry? You were aggrieved?
I was angry at the time. I was angry more with myself, really, because I could not bridge that gap. It was such a difficult path to cross, and I just didn't have, whether it was the vocabulary or the education or the understanding, I just didn't have it. Just didn't have it to give.
But Lee, why would you have that? That's not,
no,
that's not what you learned. You didn't know that. It's like you said, so it's.
But that doesn't make it easier to, when you know something, you know something's not the way it's being given. When you know something is being explained in court that's not true, when you know all those things, it's very difficult to sit there and not be able to explain why they're wrong. It's not knowing why they're wrong, because I've always known why it was wrong, but I've never been able to explain it.
But maybe that, you say you're angry with yourself, but it feels that you're angry really at the injustice, because actually,
yeah, well, maybe, but I don't feel of it that way. And in all of the evidence, you know, in the inquiry, I just feel sorry for them. I do. I just feel really sorry for the people that were involved in the other side, that had to do things that were just morally and ethically wrong, and maybe even criminal as well.
So I think
they'll have to live with that for the rest of their lives. How could you? I often say about, I lost mum and dad just 5 days apart this year. Bless them. Yeah, I know. And Dad's eulogy was lovely. It was, we talked about his 7 children and their grandchildren and how much of a family man he was. And it's quite a lovely thing at the end of your life to celebrate. And at the end of my life, I know that I'm going to be a post office victim, and I hate that. I hate that. I can't tell you how much I hate being called a victim of anything, but particularly post office. And I would, the day that people never speak of post office and Lee Castleton in the same sentence will be a great day for me.
Yeah.
Could you imagine being Paula Reynolds? You've worked for the church and everything, all good. And then you get to the end of your life and all people ever want to think about or talk about is the post office and what your actions caused to those people.
I
feel sorry for them.
I feel sorry for her. And you know what, when you let go of, well, not that you've been angry kind of thing, but I'm kind of, you know, angry on other people's behalf, because I you know, you get onto this, how can I help, you know,
Yeah.
campaign with people with justice, and you
Yeah.
think she has to live with that. So
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
think of you as a victim ever. I just think of you,
Bless you.
I just think of you're Lee and you're a campaign
Mm.
for justice. I don't
Yeah.
think and I think that's people who've gone through any kind of trauma. It's like how you deal with that. So I'm
Yeah.
you know, I've got through it, whatever it is, and I don't. And a lot of people, it might be media-driven victim. I don't think of you as
Yeah.
victim. All the others,
Oh, people feel
well,
sorry for me. I really don't.
I don't think people. I think they feel sorry for what has happened,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
maybe not. I don't. I think you've got this inner grit that, you know what, you've found other people to kind of work with you, and I really feel that. So I don't think people ever pity. I just think, bloody hell, you were amazing. You and your family are incredible, because I don't know if I could be that strong.
I don't think we had any choice. So
You didn't have any choice, exactly. But you know what, you, something kept you going.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Something
yeah,
did. But when
yeah.
it comes to the Paulas and these other CEOs and everything, you know, I do really think there's a fine line between narcissism and money and kudos. And you know what? Maybe these people, some of them can step away, think, I don't really care.
Yeah, maybe they can, but I don't believe that. I
I
don't
don't.
believe if you do so many positive things in your life, whatever that might be, in whatever way you do that, I think the negatives far, far, far harder, much harder to carry.
Yeah.
Because if you like to think of yourself, as we all probably do, like to think of yourself as a good person and a person that looks forward and to helping other people and doing the right thing, and then you're commonly, sort of pulled around in the press as being somebody who's done this to a huge group of people, then, well, I don't know.
But
Yeah,
also your family have
and
to.
I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I wouldn't, honestly. I feel sorry, and not in a horrible way or anything. I just feel sorry.
You're generous, like you
Yeah,
have to live with that now.
absolutely, genuinely, yeah, yeah. And I feel the same for all of them. All the perpetrators, people making terrible, terrible decisions out of whatever they feel to be the right thing.
And you know, just like you said previously when we first started talking, it feels like it should be a criminal matter. These people need to take accountability, and maybe in a way, if some form of you know, crime they could see, those people might start to kind of look at themselves a bit more and think, you know, what is it all about?
The other day in one of my talks, I said, in 1970s, when I was a kid, my dad would take us out to a country pub. He'd have a few pints and he'd drive home. And it was acceptable. Everybody drunk. They had a few beers and drove. Everybody. By the time we got into the 80s, it wasn't acceptable anymore. And then they could start testing people for drink driving. And then it became criminal. Yeah. That's when people stopped drink driving. That's when people, even though in the 70s it was illegal, until accountability came in, until people were being held accountable for their lives and their decisions, nothing changed. And that's what we need now. Mm-hmm. That's where we are now. If ethics and morality aren't making the changes that we need accountability. If people, you're always going to get 95% of legal practitioners or whomever acting ethically, morally, and with thought and care for the people around them. But the 5%, if they cannot toe the line and if they cannot be called out by other users of the legal system and told when they're doing something wrong, if they can't deal with all of that, then there has to be some kind of accountability. There has to be somebody who can say, that right there is never going to happen again, because we're going to hold you accountable for that. We're going to make it so that people don't want to be you and don't want to be punished like you've been. Yeah. And therefore, we're going to do this, and then we're going to stop that behaviour right now. And until
on a crime,
absolutely, until somebody does that, then nothing will change. People talk about bankers and things like that. The bankers, whatever they do, however they do it, if they get away with any criminality or any fraudulent practices, or if they do, and they're not being held accountable, it's going to grow.
Yeah, of course it will. Because there's a bubble that's allowing that bubble to grow and grow, because other people are protecting them. And we talked earlier on, and I've heard you speak about so many times, people should be able to feel that they can whistleblow. If they think, if you're a person that you can see something and you know it's wrong, either legislatively, criminally, civilly, morally,
Absolutely.
ethically, you
Yeah.
have to feel that you are safe to be able to put your hand up without repercussions. And I think so many people are so scared, like you said, like, oh, I don't want the confrontation. But actually, if you know, and I think that's the empathy we need to all learn.
You know, talking to people generally, you hear these horror stories about the NHS, where a whistleblower can be, you know, for somebody, for a company, let's talk, I know it's not a company, but the NHS as a company, a trust, whatever you want to call it, can spend immoral amounts of money, huge sums of money, crushing people so that they can't be heard, with non-disclosure agreements and all kinds of different things. When that is okay, there is something very wrong. You know, if you're prepared as a trust or a company to spend whatever it takes and not make a commercial decision, but to make a decision for any other reason, that's when it becomes wrong. And it needs to be punishable.
It does. And you know what, Lee, it's really interesting. I was involved in litigation against the NHS.
Yeah.
One of my last child, it all went wrong.
Yeah.
They immediately shut down when I was in surgery, and the doctor came in and she didn't apologize. She went, oh, and she was doing her consulting kind of thing. And I thought, she's already making sure I'm not going to do anything. But I thought, and it was when I spoke to the midwife afterwards, I said, I feel really guilty because, you know, they look after us, and I da. And she said, I'll back you, Elaine, because she said, you know what, they've got such a massive fund for a litigation pot. I was like, what?
Yeah.
That's so naive. They've got all these funds that sit there for arguments. I'm like, but if they had done something in the first place, this wouldn't have happened. And if they just invested in, you know, I need a portable.
Instead of having the fund there, if they had moved that fund from there and invested it in a portable scanner or whatever, then they wouldn't have the problem in the first place.
It was 5 years of fighting, and I felt guilty because it's our wonderful NHS. But it's actually the midwife who said to me, Elaine, you have to make change. And I did. But it was a fight, and I was up against it. But I was just shocked. I thought, no. And I said, you know what? I just wanted a sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And implement change.
Yeah.
But like you said,
sometimes you need to know that it would never happen again. You know, that they've learned a lesson. And everyone talks about learning lessons, but in actual fact, what they're learning is behaviours of how far they can go and how far is deemed appropriate or not. That's not learning lessons. That's not making things better. That's just managing the further litigation.
It's managing. It's like how far can we push that boundary?
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone needs to be taken accountable, and I guess that's, you know, I've realised I'm taking so much of your time.
No.
But it's like it is. You know, I know you said kind of we talk about ethics and everything, and so from that bit to take out of that human side of like Lee and all, you know, all these, and Joe and all these wonderful campaigners,
absolutely,
and strong people have done it. It's like, actually, what would all of you say to someone going into law, for example? What would you say to them, that the biggest tip you could give them?
To act. I read a thing the other day that somebody had written for the post office: don't write anything down that you wouldn't like to be read out openly in court. Yeah, you shake your head. Well, let's not act in any way that you wouldn't like to be spoken about in open court. I think that's something that's really important. I think it's important to everybody that you go through life, whatever that might be, acting appropriately. And just because you can't be held accountable because it's not written down doesn't mean you're not being held accountable in your life, you know, when you make decisions or whatever you do going forward. And there's not many people that can detach one from the other. So my advice would be, just deal with it properly, how you want to deal with it on your own terms. And maybe if that employment is causing you to be in that position, it's the wrong employment.
Yeah.
You know, and I think younger, you know, the Gen Z or whatever they're called now, the new 2000 kids. I had the opportunity to speak to Greenwich law school, which was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And the kids there would talk about the fact that they would never work for a company, and they're more picky about where they will go and how they want to do business. And that's more to do with ethics and morality. And I think one of the people that's probably made law schools and schools of law think about that more than anything is people like Professor Moorhead at Exeter there. Because and the way that he's able to cross that line, cross that boundary of openly speaking about the way that people act in the business forum right now, and how that's not appropriate, and how you need to deal with that through the younger generation. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I wish that more of that went on. But I would always say, don't act in a way that not only you don't want read out in court, but just that you can live on after that.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think it's a really good point to kind of leave it. I could keep asking you. Actually, I just want to ask you one more thing before
It's fine. I'm good for time, honestly. I'm really good.
I really want to know, because of course the inquiry stopped it over the summer holidays.
Yeah.
Where are we now? What can we expect?
Well, we're coming to the very, very end. We're in phase 7. This is what's happening right now. So we're talking about the current leaders, the current legal team, the current business practices, and the current compensation schemes. So we've just heard Ben Folk talking about his role as being GC, and how he's been moved aside, and all kinds of different things. There's lots of things going on, and there's lots of change, thankfully, which is good. And by the time we get to December, that'll be the end of the inquiry. So closing arguments are on the 16th and 17th of December, which should be very explosive, I would have thought, because there's lots to go in there. Yeah. And then hopefully we'll get an early report by Win early next year.
Okay. And what might what might be what you're all hoping for?
Well, right now, I'd like a change to the schemes. I think the schemes aren't working. I think one of the things that was given in evidence in this phase 7 was the fact that they were more interested. If I tell you just a little paragraph from one of the emails, there was an email bandied around between the legal team and the CAO, who was Nick Reed at the time. And basically, the legal team was saying, we could charge the postmasters for applying to the scheme, but we think that the media wouldn't like that because it would look really bad. So that would discourage people to put claims in, which was their intent. They had an intention to discourage people to claim. What they decided to do, which the media wouldn't be so against, is to make the application process very, very complicated.
Right.
That's the kind of people you're dealing with. Rather than charge you which would be morally wrong, to charge a victim an amount of money to apply to the scheme, and to even think that would be okay is beyond my belief. But then
it sounds illegal.
Yeah, well, then to knowingly make the application process as difficult and complicated as possible in order to defer and stop people from applying. Yeah. Wrong people are running the compensation scheme for them to be able to influence it that way. And I hope that going forward we learn from that. Maybe not for the post office victims, but you've got the blood scandal victims and lots of other things going along, on this same path that hopefully we'll learn from.
So therefore, in a way, it sounds like, hit the word precedent kind of thing, but if you use it like that, if that's what the report said, the schemes are going to be much more, effective. And also to me, I'm thinking, well, people won't make as many claims if they haven't got anything because the back end was done right in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing is, going forward, they're not actually arguing about claims currently. So going forward, if you have a loss in your post office today, it's a very different world to deal with that loss than it was 20 years ago, thankfully. And that's, a testament to all the hard work of all the group and all the wonderful people that have helped us on our way. But, the group's still a fight. We're being re-victimized by being a victim, which is sad but true. We're having to fight very hard. not just for compensation, but for accountability as well. I think it's important that people are held accountable because, as I said before, I think without accountability, we don't really have a full closure. And it's really important that people understand where lines have to be drawn.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't even applied to the scheme yet, so I'm a long way away from the end of this. But I'm very happy where I am. You know, I'm in control for once.
And maybe that's just it. It's feeling in control. The power is back in your hands, and it's a case of it's not ended. It's still part of this journey that you never asked for.
It's true.
But you know, Lee, I'm just so
I
grateful.
wouldn't change it as well, Elaine, because the people that are surrounding me now, I would never have met. And the people in our group, I would never have met. And I'm very thankful for that.
You really are. Stop that, I'm going to cry. You just really are one of the most beautiful, kind people I've ever met. And you know, Lisa's a very lucky lady, and I know that you think the same. She'll think the same way. But your children seem to be just, you know, they are in your kind of love as well with the whole family, and to know that actually they can now, as young adults, help this, make sure
keep it perpetuating and make sure that people, you know, if you close yourself off and don't answer questions, people never learn. And I'm more than happy to answer questions because I want people to learn, because I never ever want it to happen to anybody ever again. So it's important that we do this, and I'm very grateful for that. And while sometimes I do get emotional, I think it's important that we all speak, because the quiet person is the one that's abused most, I think.
Yeah, always. And on that, I'm going to say, Lee, so lovely to speak to you. I will catch up with you in January, if that's okay. I'll just send you a personal kind of thing just to see how things are, how you are. And one of my best friends lives in Malton, so you might go, I know, we're going up in May, so maybe I'll go, Lee.
That's where Lisa is.
Scarborough. Oh, is that? It's beautiful. I'll just say thank you very honestly. You know, I'm always so grateful for your time. I know that you're fitting at me and to be really kind, but I think I'll put this out there, and I think we've just got to know, more and more people have got to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
See that fight and not give up.
We'll never give in.
Never. Take care, Lee.
Thank you.
Bye, darling. Bye.